Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webcast today. My name's Rich Miller, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm with Visible Technologies here in Seattle. I hope everybody's having a great day no matter where you are. So before we get into the presenters today, I wanted to talk about the agenda just real briefly, and also deal with one other housekeeping issue here. As we move through the session, we'll be taking Q&As. There are two places that you could put in a question for us. We're going to be holding our questions for the end of the session, but within your WebEx panel on the right-hand side, you should see both a chat and also a Q&A. Please feel free to put any questions or comments you may have for us into either one of those. We'll be looking at both of them, and we'll come back and we'll address them at the end of the session. After we go through our introductions, what we'll do is we'll spend about 15 to 20 minutes or so talking about the research that's been done in conjunction with the Digital Clarity Group. We've done some great work together with them talking about big data and how big data manifests itself through small data, and more specifically through social media analytics and social media monitoring. After that research overview, we're going to be spending some time in something that I think will be real exciting. We'll be talking in a roundtable type of format about some of the big issues and how do you go implement some of these small data or social media analytics strategies. More specifically, we'll talk a little bit about what does social mean within the context of big data? How is it used in organizations within the context of big data to achieve outcomes? We'll talk about some of the differences between B2B and B2C as it comes to analytics of social media data. We'll also talk about metrics and measurements. With the advent of big data, with the speed, with the types of tools that you have available to you now, there are all kinds of new metrics that are presented to users of small data, and we want to spend a little bit of time talking about what the ROI is behind that. And finally, we'll talk about governance, something that's often forgotten. But thinking about the processes, thinking about the people that will help people get the most out of their big data and social media analytics efforts. Then we'll come back to the Q&A, and then we'll spend a little bit of time and wrap up. The objective for today is to be educational for everybody on the phone. So we'd like to keep it as interactive as we possibly can. If you have any questions at all, please send them to us through the Q&A or through the chat. So with no further ado, what I would like to do is introduce today's presenters and panelists. From DCG, the Digital Clarity Group, we have Bonde, who's a partner and principal analyst with DCG. He's the one that's been responsible for running this report with us, this research with us. As you can see there, he's really very, very experienced in this topic matter, so I think we're pretty lucky to have him here talking about this. He has a CMO background, which will make it very relevant for a lot of our marketing attendees that are out there. He's been a pioneer in social marketing and social media for a long time, starting companies like OfferPop. Prior to that, he spent a lot of time with some leading research firms out there, specifically McKinsey Consulting, where he did some early work in online advertising, and then also the Yankee Group. And he was responsible for one of their internet practices at the Yankee Group while he was there. As you can see, he tweets regularly at Bonde, I'm sorry. Next, we've got Erin Isselmann, who's a director of the social marketing group over at Xerox Corporation. She's an experienced B2B marketer in the technology industry with companies such as Tektronix, Xerox, Sapient Health Network. Has done a lot of work in the past in social media, public relations, branding, marketing communications, interactive marketing, and internal communications. So a very broad experience base within B2B marketing and also within social marketing. Currently, what she's responsible for is she owns the global social marketing programs at Xerox. So that means she's responsible for the marketing strategy for the social programs, the governance, the management of the listening program, oversight of the corporate social media channels, and also their platforms like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And finally, from Visible Technologies, we've got Mike Maziarka, who's Senior Director with us, who is responsible for the product management function here at Visible within our marketing team. And in that role, what he really does is he drives the roadmap for Visible Technologies, figuring out what types of functionality, what types of benefits we can bring to our customers and to the market to help them get more out of social media analytics, really helping them to drive that ROI. Again, a very experienced person, lots of experience in social media, content and document management, electronic publishing, has a broad base of experience with companies like Symphony, which was merged with Visible Technology, BEA, InfoTrends, and Frame Technology. So those are our presenters today. I think we're very lucky to have them. I'm very excited about where we can go with this today. And before we get going, what I wanted to do is ask a poll of those in the audience. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a poll question that's just been opened. And you should be able to vote, and you should be able to choose multiple items. The question is, what use case for social media data do you expect to be a high priority for you in the coming 6 to 12 months? And you can see the options there within your poll. Is it reputation and perception management? Is it competitive intelligence? Is it product planning and development? Is it marketing campaign management? So understanding how people are reacting to your marketing campaigns and what the ROI of those marketing campaigns might be. Is it customer service engagement, trying to be proactive about customer support? Is it influencer marketing, identifying the influencers, managing those influencers, getting them to be a real asset for you? Is it media buying? Is it lead or demand generation? Or is it web content optimization, trying to understand what is really working for you on the web and what is not working for you on the web? So you have the opportunity there to select multiple items. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that poll open for just a second, but we can see some of the leading things that are coming through are reputation and perception management, marketing campaign management, some of the things that are lagging in terms of priorities. Let's see, media buying, a few people have mentioned. Otherwise, everything else is, kind of right in the middle. So what we'll do is we'll try to take that into account as we move forward into our presentation, really trying to address reputation perception management, how data can be used to support that. Also, marketing campaign management and customer service engagement is another one that's getting pretty high scores. So thank you very much for your responses there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close the poll. And as soon as the poll closes, in just a couple of seconds, I'm going to hand the baton over to, need to wait for the poll to close here, just 1 second. Thank you for your patience. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Alan Bonde from Digital Clarity Group.
Top of mind for a lot of marketers. I've been really digging into the idea of how can we deliver the value of big data to the masses of sort of non-technical users, and this is really the sort of the focus of the study that Rich mentioned that our group has been working on over the last few months with a number of partners, talking to a number of different organizations to try to get a pulse on, really what's a priority, how are people thinking about this, but also how are they doing it in action. And that's what I wanted to sort of set off in terms of our conversation, is take a quick snapshot at really the state of big data and specifically why marketers are playing such a critical role in its evolution and going from the vision into specific actionable activities and initiatives. So, it's not a surprise that big data is top of mind because we're spending a lot of time and effort and money on it, right? So, according to Deloitte, more than 90% of the Fortune 500 have a big data initiative. And if you look at the overall spending on big data tools and services and technology, you know, we're spending as an industry upwards of $10 billion to date on these various initiatives. Yet, despite this effort, there's some grumbling out there, and people are starting to question where the value is. And in fact, as I talk to different executives and strategic planners and the like, there seemed to be a pretty consistent frustration with the pace of this innovation and where the value is coming. And there's a direct quote here right in the middle of the slide from, I believe this was a healthcare executive, that was sort of acknowledging the notion that everybody's interested in this shiny object of big data, yet it has to have a purpose. And, you know, from our research and from the work that I've done in the past, you know, we really believe that this purpose lies in marketing and in the ability to transform the way that we not only get to know our customers, but the way that we run campaigns and target our content and get to know customers really at a level of detail and granularity that we've never been able to in the past. And, you know, why is it also important that marketers are in the middle of this is if you look at the now infamous Gartner data point about the CMO outspending the CIO in a couple more years, the CMO is really controlling a number of these assets. So it's important that marketing is leading the charge when it comes to not only how we deploy sort of traditional big data, but how we kind of re-examine its value and maybe even question the way that it's being proposed right now. Number two, and this came through loud and clear in some of our interviews, is, you know, marketers of all types and all size organizations are really looking for new ways to harness the power of big data. They like the idea. In some cases, they're benefiting from, you know, predictive analytics and insight at a scale that they've never had before. But really, marketers are clamoring to turn those insights into very practical, you know, tools and apps and things that they can use right now. And this is really, I think, the undercurrent for this presentation and for our event here is thinking about how we can create big data value from data that we already have. And a lot of that data, the most useful data, is in fact social media data. So what we think is that if we can focus locally, and what I mean locally, I mean focusing on very specific marketing use cases, very practical ways to put this insight into action. And we can think about that in practical small steps, and we can tap our social resources, that this is really key to creating value, not only for the marketing organization, but also for the enterprise overall. So that's kind of the opening. So what is small data? So people ask me, and I had the opportunity actually to talk with Nate Silver at an event last week, and we had a short discussion about sort of big data versus small data. I had an opportunity to run this definition by him. This is one of the outcomes of the research that Rich mentioned is, you know, we tested this idea with a lot of different organizations, and this is how I define small data for our conversation today. So it's all about connecting data with people. And this is important because a lot of big data is sort of about systems and storage and processing power. Small data to me is about people first. So it's about connecting people with timely, meaningful insights that could be, in fact, derived from big data or from local sources or channels like social media, that's organized and packaged, often visually, to be accessible, understandable, and actionable for everyday tasks. And this is really sort of the key to me, is it's about taking this power and this fabulous ability to gather up insights across multiple channels, but applying it in practical ways so that we can use it every day. So this isn't a once-a-quarter initiative or once-a-year thing. This is data that's actionable in our everyday roles, used for everyday tasks. So with this in mind, let me just sort of dig in a little bit further. You know, we're really in a social era, and this is, sorry for sort of an eye chart here, but this is a slice of an exhibit in our research study that looks at sort of the brief history of big data, small data, social data. And there's a couple markers here that I wanted to highlight because it's really sort of keys into the conversation that we're going to have in a few minutes. Number one is if you look at the 3 V's, the infamous 3 V's of big data, the Doug Laney piece, which now is like a dozen years old. If we think of those 3 V's, I would argue that social listening, small data, social sharing, all the things that we're going to talk about today really create a 4th V that adds to the 3 V's of big data, but this 4th V is all about value. So it's how can individuals get tangible value from that insight, from that data. That's number 1. Number 2, if we fast forward to today and the dozen years of innovation that we've had sort of since this notion of the 3 V's of big data were proposed, we really believe that social channels are the key not only to unlocking sort of this big data value, but also they're super rich with a lot of local small data that may in fact allow us to do things like inform our day-to-day marketing, inform buyer decisions, add context to our conversations or our content delivery, and of course social is really great at amplifying our messages and driving word of mouth. So within this sort of overall landscape of big data and this transformation that we're seeing into small data, social is providing an incredibly important, not only channel, but also source of insight and source of delivering that insight to an increasingly mobile social environment. So as Rich mentioned at the top, and we sort of teed it up a little bit in our poll, a core part of our research was talking to organizations, talking to experts, and trying to get a feeling for where are they starting. So if the key is turning this sort of massive amount of information into very practical steps, and as the title of the event is, sort of getting big data value out of social, where do we start? So what we tried to do is we created a number of sort of beachhead use cases. So these use cases are common in terms of focusing on, they're mostly marketing oriented, not exclusively, but they're really focusing on how do you combine insights from multiple data sources for specific tasks, for specific uses. And so there's 4 of these here. I don't want to get into the fine-grained details, but I wanted to highlight a couple things. Number 1, these are, again, kind of everyday tasks that can be enhanced by using the insight from multiple channels and certain technologies, as you can see on the right-hand side. So there's a number of enabling technologies that are going to power either market insight to do better competitive intelligence, or in the case of targeting, how you can enrich your content in terms of focusing on certain segments, or one of the more interesting ones is this kind of best action, where a good example would be like a flash sale, where based on your inventory, based on what people are talking about on social channels, based on what people have done on your website before, maybe opted in, you can present a real-time offer based on a whole bunch of different data, the changes in that data, and you can basically deliver real-time insights based on sort of real-time analysis. So we have a number of these use cases that we think are good beachheads for marketers, but what's particularly interesting and relevant to this conversation is the role of social in all of these is significant. So there's 2 components that we see. The sort of lime green key or coded token here, where social listening is powering basically 3 of these major use cases. So we think that social listening is a tremendous building block for driving this type of innovation. And the other one sort of in maroon is the notion of social sharing and collaboration. So in all of these use cases, either social data is informing the decision making, or social networking and collaboration is informing the way that we can apply those insights within our everyday roles. And again, there's a lot more in our report, and we'll mention this later on, but as one of the co-sponsors of the study, people will be able to get a copy of this research through Visible after the event. So let me kind of wrap things up as we transition into the panel portion of our program. So, our team has thought a lot about kind of both the first principles for small data as well as the types of use cases, the kind of action planning for turning it into specific campaigns or specific programs. But I like to think about it in terms of these 4 dimensions. So to me, the small data manifesto, if you will, is as follows. It's about making it simple. It's about making it smart. Now, it's easy to do one or the other, right? You can be very simple-minded and not be very smart, or you can be sophisticated and not be very simple. But really, small data is about balancing simplicity with sophistication. You need to be responsive, so you got to be where your customers are, where your employees want to work. This is a mobile, connected, bring your own device kind of a world, so it has to be responsive. But last but not least, is you have to be social. And I think there's really 2 dimensions of this that I'll lead off with as we get into our discussion. Number 1 is social is a source, it's a tool, it's a delivery channel, but it's also really key in terms of making insights both accessible and actionable if you go back to our definition. Number two, it's on us as marketers. So when I put on my CMO hat, we're in a unique position to not only aggregate all this data, but to package it up and to position it so that it's not just a box of data or a box of parts, but rather it's incredibly useful insights or alerts or dashboards, and it's very actionable by users who in many cases are not going to be technical. So I think this is really the opportunity for all of us, both on the panel but also on the call, is to think about how we can drive this big data value, how we can take advantage of the excitement that people have about big data, but do it in practical steps. And we think that that's really a good place to start would be looking at your social listening, looking at your social testimonials and reviews, look at the ability to use social channels as an amplifier for word of mouth, and then use that as a beachhead to start getting more and more investments in, say, things like predictive analytics or product recommendations or things like that. So with that, hopefully this sort of teed up our conversation. Let me turn things back to Rich.
That was a great review. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And as we move into the panel discussion, because we have so many people that have come on the call recently, since we did the initial introductions, I just wanted to go through quick introductions so everybody will understand the voices that are on the panel. Joining us on the panel today are three people: Alan Bonde, who is a partner and principal with the Digital Clarity Group. We have Erin Isselmann, who is a director of global social marketing at Xerox Corporation. And finally, we've got Michael Maziarka, who is a senior director of product management at Visible Technologies. So with no further ado, Alan, I'm going to pass it back to you, and you can run our roundtable discussion topics.
Awesome. So what I'd love to do is sort of bring in our other panelists here and tee things up, because obviously the general topic is how do we create big data value? How do we capitalize on the promise of big data using our existing assets and tools, and especially what we know about our social channels? So with no further ado, let me sort of start this portion of the program by asking our panelists, and I'll start with Erin here, how's social changing the game? Because obviously we've had customer data in the past, we've had other transactional data. How do you see sort of social as a game changer?
Thanks, Alan. Well, I see social as, yet another data point for marketeers. And we've had lots of data points that we're all very comfortable with, customer service information and sales information and prospect information. And they come from a variety of different sources, but I really see the value in social data it's very current, it's very actionable, and it really makes that picture a bit clearer for all of us as marketeers about what's the intent at any given moment of a particular customer or prospect, what's their perception of your brand, and how can you work to on your social strategy really to move the needle based on that data. And that's what we do at Xerox. We really look at, we're in the midst of a brand transformation. Everybody probably associates Xerox still with the word copier, which is a great thing. We love that, and we're very proud of it. But we are now a services company. So our North Star, when we look at social strategy, is really helping to shape perception of what the Xerox brand is today. And so we take the data from social, particularly about perception, and we use that, and we use it to shape our strategy.
Awesome. So Mike, how do you see this? Because I know you have perspectives across a number of customers. How has social really fundamentally changed, what some of those organizations have done, maybe in terms of what Erin talked about, or maybe even different applications?
Well, certainly. So, I think one of the key things to think about with social is that it's not a specialty area anymore. It's a natural part of how everyone communicates today, and it's not just teens and millennials. You have people of all ages and genders and locations around the world now participating in social. Which is not surprising as a result to see the volume of available social information just growing at a very rapid pace. So as Erin pointed out, with all of those conversations taking place, as consumers are talking about their experiences, their thoughts, their impressions, their plans, why not tap into that, not just as a commentary on how you're performing, but also to be able to identify unmet needs and potential opportunities for you in the marketplace. And so, when we talk about this notion of big data and how we could leverage that for marketing purposes, I think social plays a very key role in that, as you pointed out during the earlier part of your presentation.
It's kind of interesting, and I like what both of you guys said, that to me, social fits in this portfolio of data that we have. One of the things that we did in our study is sort of looked at historically, the growth of starting with transactional data. A lot of traditional quote-unquote marketing information was based in transactions, your CRM systems, your point of sale. Then we had kind of the whole web come on the scene, and we got, a better glimpse maybe into web behavior and, consumers as they, followed a path to purchase, for example, less about sort of what they were saying, but more about what they were doing. To me, social kind of fills out that third leg, that not only is it, as Erin, you said, more kind of timely and immediate, but there's a narrative there. People are actually able to comment if they're commenting on a Facebook page, or they're tweeting about good service or bad service. Isn't that sort of what makes social also interesting, is that it's a different type of data? There's a narrative that's not available, say, in traditional, system data or call center data?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Erin. I was just going to say, as this becomes available, it's real time. It's that ability to tap into what the consumer is saying right now based on what they're experiencing in the marketplace.
Well, and I think just to add to that, the beautiful thing is that because you can take action right away, I've seen numerous situations where on our social channels, we've started out with one perception of our brand, and because we use social to make us, a more human brand, we've completely, done a 180 with someone's perception, and that's a very, that's a very great thing for a brand, and it's something that everyone would like to, scale, I think.
So let me shift to the second question, because I know that traditionally, right, and it's funny saying traditionally with respect to social, because a lot of it still is relatively new. A lot of the real kind of, high-profile campaigns or high-profile brands are more on the consumer side, but obviously, you take examples like Xerox, a number of the organizations that we're all familiar with that we've even worked at that are more on the business-to-business side. How does it really change, I guess, when you talk about business to consumer versus business to business? And I'll address this one to you, Mike, because I know that you've looked across both types of organizations in the work that you do with Visible. Are there some core differences, and what's different and what's the same?
So it's funny that you say traditionally, because actually that's exactly what I was thinking. Especially in the early days of social, we tended to think about it more in the B2C domain. However, that's not true anymore today. There's value to both B2C as well as B2B, and even B2E, as businesses look to what their employees are communicating about in sharing their thoughts and perceptions, not just about the market, but the company itself. In overall, across that spectrum, I think the key thing to note is that the number of use cases that can leverage social intelligence just continues to grow. We've seen this in the polling question that Rich put up earlier. Certainly you talked about this in terms of how you categorize those different use case opportunities. But what we're seeing with our customers is that those use cases are expanding across different functional teams, across brands, and across regions as well. Now, having said that, I think there are some sweet spots in each of these areas. So, when you look at B2C today, some of the activity that we see taking place are one around better understanding the voice of the customer. So as the customer is talking about their needs, how they're viewing potential solutions that are available to meet that need, questions they have about alternatives in the market, how they weight different product attributes, different things like that that can really formulate not only your go-to-market strategy and messaging ideas, but possibly also product ideation. That sense of really getting a better feel for the consumer as a whole. And then once you've launched, really improving that customer experience. how does the customer interact with not only the product but you as a company, and what is that experience like for them, regardless of the channel in which they direct their communication, whether it's traditional phone or email or through social. You know, that ability to be able to interact with them across that spectrum is increasingly key. Likewise, on the B2B side, some of the areas where we see a lot of traction today are, one, really getting a sense for how your programs and your messaging is resonating with the market. Is the market picking up on that? What is bringing meaning to them? How do they associate value with what you're communicating to the marketplace? And knowing where to fund or where to fuel the investment for where you go with different campaigns or programs. Another key area that we see a lot of growth potential in is influencer marketing in the B2B space. So not just broadly communicating to all of your target market segments, but identifying who's influential in the marketplace and really kind of segmenting that conversation to understand how you're doing with that particular set of constituents and what they think and are communicating to the rest of the market about you, and how you develop a relationship with them in social is definitely an area of growth in the B2B area.
How does this resonate with you, Erin? I bet I can't see you, but I bet you're nodding here when Mike went through his list of some of these areas.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Mike had to say. I think you know, sometimes marketeers in the B2B space are, you know, we have this envy of the B2C companies and the giant consumer packaged good brands and what they're able to do, and you know, and have been able to accomplish in such a short time in social. But I think it's one of the most interesting pieces of information I've seen come out, and we talk about it all the time, is in the B2B space. You know, somewhere between 60 to 70% of decisions about, you know, a vendor or a partner that you're going to work with are made prior to ever contacting that, getting any information from the businesses that are in that space. So there's this whole opportunity to be a thought leader. And you know, you could look at this two ways, like, oh darn, you know, people are, you know, not relying on us to get the information they need about us. What are we going to do? Or you could look at it as an opportunity. We choose to look at it as an opportunity, and we see social as the right place to start that thought leadership, that influencer marketing. And we've actually done a lot in content marketing in some really important areas, and particularly healthcare, which is very important to us. And just today we launched a new a content site, realbusiness.com, that speaks really to simplicity in the workplace, and that will really speak to a lot of our target audience, and really help us, you know, to get Xerox into the conversation, so that when it comes time to make a decision, people, you know, put you on their short list.
So, Erin, how can people learn about that? Because that seems actually really interesting. Is there a website, or is there a place people can go to learn about that initiative?
About our content marketing site, our content marketing site is called www.realbusiness.com.
Cool. So let me transition into the next, and this, you know, this is the next question is a topic that comes up regardless of the tools and regardless of the initiative, and that's metrics. You know, like online marketing, social marketing comes, you know, with its own set of metrics, and I'd love to, maybe starting with Mike, you know, are people still measuring, you know, likes and retweets kind of as a measure of their initiatives, or are they getting more sophisticated and having a more, I guess, a broader view of what they need to be measuring to know that their either social marketing or their, you know, listening programs are in fact delivering value? What are you hearing these days about metrics?
So certainly people are still measuring likes and followers and things of that nature, but you are correct. I think that increasingly we're finding the market as a whole is becoming more sophisticated in what they want to track and measure relative to social. I think one of the key things is when you start to look at this particular area to move beyond aggregate measures. what does the total volume of the number of posts that mention your company or your brand really tell you on a day-to-day basis? Does it matter if I have 1,100 posts today and then 1,300 tomorrow and then it drops back down the day after? Is that really providing a useful measure to me? But instead, start to look at this more from applying this at a more granular level. So getting beyond those aggregate measures to start to look at what is the intersection of conversation, not just about my brand and company, but relative to different attributes of the brand or the product, events that happen in the marketplace, traditional measures like sentiment, and some of those influencer identifications like likes or followers. Intersecting that with the different sites where the conversation can happen and the different media types. Does the conversation differ across blogs versus forums versus Twitter as an example, authors or influencer lists, and even location? How does that conversation differ across those different regions that are a target for your particular company? Really honing in on that intersection of those different sets of conversation and using that as a guide to direct where you go with your messaging, your communication strategy, with your programs, your campaigns, and developing benchmarks that you can really measure against. Possibly your own benchmarks as well as what your competitors are doing in this place, or doing in the space. So over time, you get a sense for when I launch a new program, what do I anticipate that conversation really to be, the level of that conversation to be around, and how long should we be able to sustain that before it starts to drop off? Really getting a sense for applying this so that you can establish some KPIs for these different programs or campaigns that you're running, and using that as a vehicle to really drive where you go with future investment.
Erin, what are some of the things that Xerox is measuring? Is it a similar approach, or do you have, I guess, unique things that are specific to your market or to your business when it comes to the social programs?
From a measurement perspective, we are doing, we've kind of done what I think a lot of companies have been doing, which is categorize different things into, and get standard definitions that are kind of benchmarks for the, overall, so that you're looking at, you actually, because it's such an evolving practice, you need to say, okay, what is activity, and define exactly what activity means. Like, what's a post, on Facebook? What is, what does a blog count as a piece of activity? That's just a basic measure. And then really defining what engagement is. Engagement, truly, we find engagement to be, the next, we've spent the last year really on all of our platforms and channels really looking at engagement as, establishing a baseline. So here's where we are in terms of engagement today, and where do we believe we should be in the next year, and how are we going to get there? Because engagement is very important, and then you need to layer on top of that, sentiment analysis. That'll be the next stage. And then also there are going to be higher value engagements. Comments on blogs are going to be higher value than a like on a Facebook page. So you're going to have to figure out what exactly, how you're going to score those engagements. And I'm speaking primarily from a brand level perspective and really transforming a brand. I know that there are lots of companies that are moving into more, how can I measure the social journey of a customer from the first action, whether it be looking at a blog, reading a blog post, to buying a product, to advocating for the brand and driving more sales. That's the full cycle. So I know some folks in our lines of business are looking at that type of metric as well.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's about creating an action, right? I think that's a summary maybe of what you said is it may start with engagement or creating those connections. The way that we sort of frame it at DCG is there's sort of three stages. We want to inform our customers. We want to connect them, especially where there's influencers involved or consumers are evaluating different options, that connecting people with reviews or with influencers is really important. And that's a level of engagement. But at the end of the day, we want to motivate them, whether they're a business-to-business buyer or a consumer, to take an action. Do you guys kind of agree with that, that's the ultimate measure is whether we've motivated someone to take that action? What do you think, Mike?
I think that's part of it. I think part of it is also a change in perception, which is a little bit more difficult to measure over time. So is somebody favorably inclined to either your brand or your product following that engagement, which may not have an associated action right there with it, but something that kind of shows itself over time. More difficult to measure, but I think definitely an objective as well.
I would agree with Mike. Yeah, I mean, we look at it. We look at marketing, and we think social marketing in particular fits this model. We call it the cycle of advocacy. And so, it's instead of the traditional marketing funnel, we kind of turn it on its ear and we say we've got this cycle, where we start at the top of the cycle and we try to, forge shared belief, right, with a target audience. So for the brand, that's all of the people that we want to influence their perception about the brand. So then we want them to take an action, a positive action that like it's reading a blog post or tweeting, retweeting, clicking on a link, that sort of thing. And we hope that action will lead them to take maybe a further action. And we hope our actions as well as a company will give them further, based on that first interaction, we actually encourage them to continue to feel positively and to feel that they actually have the right impression of us. So we want, it's really a summary of our actions. It's not just the first thing we do, it's everything we do with that customer or prospect that feeds that cycle. And then, the gold standard would be someday getting a customer who is out there advocating for you and actually driving other potential customers to your brand.
I mean, that's the ultimate, right, is where social becomes a channel that our customers connect us with people that we don't even know yet. And that's, that's independent of whether it's a consumer example or a business example. Let me, because we're getting near the end of this portion of the program where we wanted to have this roundtable, let me end with a question that I'm going to address back to you, Erin, in terms of governance, because you kind of described a very interesting process. I love the idea of cycle of advocacy. Maybe you can touch on it and mention sort of how Xerox thinks about, the management of this and the governance that's involved and what people are allowed to do, because I think that this is something that people talk about, but they haven't really necessarily thought through or executed. So maybe we can end with that thought. First you, Erin, and then Mike, you can add your color in terms of where should people think or where should they start in terms of building some governance around this process?
Sure. We actually started, we look at listening as the first stage in any social marketing, journey. So we started listening, and then, so we didn't, at first we had no channels, so we just listened. And then we established channels, once we've done the listening and we know a little bit more about what our target audience, the customer or the prospect, is really thinking about us in a particular space. But you really need to build governance. It's an important. It's not a. It's not necessarily the highlight of everyone's day, but establishing how you as a brand are going to operate in the social sphere is very important. It's really important to create a community of social marketers within your company that collaborate with one another. And they understand. I mean, these aren't just rules that you kind of just throw out there and say, okay, we say in the center, you do X, Y, and Z because we tell you to. You really need to explain and really share experiences of why these decisions in terms of governance are important for the brand and also important for the various lines of business or regions that you're working with. And then you need to be open when you get feedback from those folks around the globe and around the world that maybe what we thought was working, 5 years ago needs to be reassessed. So I'll be the first to say that we were very, very democratic when we opened social channels. We ended up in a situation we had over 100 branded channels. And we spent a lot of time this year working with that community that we've established to say, okay, there were categories of things that we thought were the right thing to do at the time, but given where we are today in the evolution of social marketing, they don't really make sense anymore. And how should we as a group really rationalize that so that we have the right social ecosystem for our company?
Oh, that's awesome. What do you think, Mike? Are you hearing across your customer base, are there organizations that kind of really get this versus what would you say the mix is of ones that have that much of a thought-through process versus ones that are kind of winging it?
Well, I think some of it's kind of where a company happens to be on the adoption scale of this. And so, as companies start to get into this notion of really leveraging social intelligence, it's not unusual to find that it's a particular use case, possibly with a particular team or function in the organization. But one of the bigger trends we see is that as that number of use cases grow, many of our customers are starting to look at this and saying, how can we do this more consistently across the organization? Can we develop teams and have supporting best practices around the best way to roll out these types of programs, and really taking a step back and saying, okay, what are our goals around this? Where do we want to be 6 months, a year from now? And then really managing the programs to those goals. Setting it up with associated KPIs so that you can kind of measure and track your ability to hit those particular targets, and doing so in a way that as others start to adopt in your organization, it's easy to fold them into the process to bring them on, so that you do have a consistent methodology and approach to how you look at social and how you leverage that for a variety of different needs.
No, that's some awesome advice. So, Erin, Mike, thank you so much for your perspectives. Let me turn things back to Rich.
Great, thanks a lot, everybody, for that participation in that panel discussion. Before we move forward, a lot of the questions that were asked were actually answered. There were a couple of questions about content. There was a question that was made about managing the customer experience, and I think that Erin answered that really well and how that fits in there. There was one question that came in about governance, and I think it might have something to do with when we think about big data, we think about business intelligence, we think about business analysts. So as companies are out there looking to kind of bolster their ranks of social media analysts, what type of person should you really be looking for? Is there a trade-off between having somebody that has that analytic mindset against somebody that really understands, social media and the value of the data coming out of there? What type of person, should we be looking for to really fill that social media analytic role within our company? And I think I'll throw it out there to all three of you to answer.
Well, so, Erin, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Erin. I'll let you go first.
I thought a lot about this recently in terms of how, of what type of person that we look for that, because our model right now on our team is we have a lot of folks who are, doers in social marketing and on a daily basis, and we do have them. They also own the analytic piece, and I think that's really important, and it varies by platform. So it's important to have expertise on the platform. It's important to have expertise in actually managing a community on a platform, because the analytics are great, but you need that. You need to understand the communities in which you're working in, right? But I do see a role. And I don't know a lot of companies that have this role yet, but I do see the future where you need somebody who understands social, and they also understand data and analytics, and they understand how to really get to the point where you can get to a true ROI.
Great. Any other, and specifically, you know, the analysis of unstructured data versus structured data. But Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, and actually I was going to follow up with that exact point, Rich, is the other dimension I would add into this is a market research background. You know, somebody who has a sense for how to mine into that set of information where you're not just trying to validate a particular point, but really trying to better understand the market, the needs, and the voice of the consumer or customer in this particular case. And so somebody who has who's inquisitive by nature and really wants to learn and be able to get good insights from that, and then also correlate that with other market research data, you know, which probably ties tightly in with the data analytics background. But how do you make sense of this in terms of other research that you have or other feedback mechanisms from the market as a whole, so that you can tie it together to really create that more holistic view of what's going on in the market?
Great.
Yeah, and if I just want to amplify something that Mike said, because I think it's really important. This tying together aspect is really key. And in fact, one of my colleagues at DCG, Robert Rose, has written a few pieces on the notion of a new role, which he calls the manager of meaning, which I love because it's sort of one part researcher, one part connector, or one part coordinator. You know, that role may in fact not yet exist, but I think it does have elements of being a market researcher and somebody who can understand both the data side, but also the use of that data and the domain of the business, and be sort of that ultimate connector between the insights, the users of the data, and also the why, right? To Erin's point, you know, how is this meaningful in terms of not just, you know, shining the spotlight on a trend or on a market or a product, but how is it actually going to turn into meaningful ROI from the business perspective? So I think it's kind of an interesting idea that this role might not exactly exist, but calling that person sort of the manager of meaning is sort of a neat way to think about it.
Great. Thanks for those thoughts. Well, I think what we want to do here in the last 5 minutes that we have open to us is really just kind of wrap things up. There were a lot of points that were made today, and it's tough to distill it down to a few points, but I think we'll give it a shot. You know, the first thing that I wanted to call out is I read an article recently that was called "The Death of the CMO," the Chief Marketing Officer, and it was all about the birth of something called the Chief Customer Officer. And I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the value that marketing can bring to the organization and how that's evolving through big data, and having that intimate, recent understanding of what people think about you and what they're saying is just so critical to everybody in the organization. So if you're a marketer, go out there and start talking to people in R&D, start talking to people in finance, start talking to people in customer service about what their objectives are, and then think about how you can use social media to kind of solve some of those problems, and using small data to do that. If you're not in marketing, maybe you're in IT, maybe you're in R&D, find out who is really the social media expert within the organization and get close with them. Start talking to them about strategies that you can implement together that will help the organization make better decisions, is what it's really all about. And I think that comes back to the 4 points that Alan made. You know, keep it simple, you know, be smart, be responsive, and be social. Right? The other thing that I think was discussed more than a couple of times here was, you know, none of this is easy. You don't just click your fingers and it happens. It's a journey. So invest the time, invest the dollars to find the right people in and out of your organization to help you be successful. Critically important. And then finally, the other thing that I think we heard a little bit is, you know, finding the right partner is key. There are a lot of social media analytic platforms that are out there that, you know, you can push a lot of buttons and make them do a lot of things, but finding the right partner with resources that really know social media, know their platform, can become intimate with your business, and tying all those together along with you, you know, is really key. So Before we do finally close it up, any comments on any of those from anybody? Erin, maybe we can start with you. Do you have any comments and a wrap-up?
Yeah, I just would say on the last point, I mean, that I get asked all the time, how do you select, you know, a vendor for or a tool? That's usually the question, you know. And I always answer it with, there's lots of tools that do pretty much exactly the same thing, but you need to really evaluate is finding the right partner. And it depends on your company and the resources you have, and what, you know, and then your partner's resources and what they're willing to bring to the table. And 9 times out of 10, to me, the right partner is somebody who's going to get to know your company and show a real willingness. They're going to also get to know your brand. They're going to be an extension of your team, and that, you know, we are customer visible, and I've found that to be the case with them.
Great, thank you very much. Mike, any comments in closing?
Just to kind of follow up on the thought on the people side, you know, several years ago, I would say it was difficult to find talented individuals in the social space, and those who were adept at the range of skills that we talked about a little bit earlier in the call. But I definitely think that the market has matured, that there are people with that level of talent out there. Additionally, you know, there are providers like Visible who also have staff that can help guide and help kickstart those efforts, as well as supplement those over time to provide that level of expertise that you need. And so I think you know, not only the technology is here today, but I think you also have the resources available to truly be successful with these initiatives.
Great. And Alan, any closing thoughts?
I mean, I think as a summary of what Erin and Mike just said, you know, this is doable. This is not a boil the ocean type of a thing. You know, big data is daunting if you think of it that way. But if we break it down and we think about the small data, the everyday data, our everyday tasks, you know, this is very doable. We're doing some of these things already. There's great consumer example. There's awesome tools out there. You know, we can start small, but we can create a lot of value, and that'll just build momentum. So I think the challenge to everybody that joined us today is you're already doing some of this, and that's great news. You don't have to wait till next year to get the value of big data. You can, you know, create some of that value right now by starting with the social channels. So that's sort of my bottom line.
Great, thank you. Well, finally, you know, a little bit about Visible. I'm only going to take 15 seconds or so to talk about this. You know, we are a platform, but we also are a company of experts in social media that can partner with you. We really think that we have a fantastic platform with data you can trust and analytic insights that you can't get from other tools. But as Erin was talking about, it's really our people that make that thing sing for you. And that's really how we position ourselves in the market. I'd like to thank Alan from the Digital Clarity Group for being on the call with us, and also thank you for all his effort in this research. And I'd also, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our other panelists for their generosity with their time and also all of their insights, and that's Erin and Mike. Thank you very, very much for that. Final slide here, a little public service announcement for things that are coming up. Starting next month, November 20th, we're going to have a webcast where we're going to start looking at social media insights in depth, how and what types of social media insights you can look for and what you should be looking for. So I think it's a logical progression of this topic that we introduced today. And that's going to be something that we're going to do on a monthly basis moving forward. Really, what we try to do is keep our webcasts as educational as we possibly can. You know, we want you walking away with some ideas that you can go implement at the end of the webcast. And that's what this series is going to be about, the Insight series. If you do have any questions you want to talk to one of us at Visible, you can email us at info@visibletechnologies.com, or you can reach out to us at Visible. Or finally, on our webpage, you will see a demo request. You will see a contact us if you have any desire to engage with us. We'd love to talk to you. And really, that's it. The final note here is that I will be sending out both the report from DCG, and I will also be sending out the recorded webcast to everybody that did register, whether you showed up for the webcast or you weren't able to make it. I will be sending out that recording to all the registrants. So in closing, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it very much, and we hope to talk to you soon. Take care.